So, this is the second episode of Read Walks and Talks. I'm going to cover a multitude of topics today. The first one is going to be Matt Walsh's movie, Am I Racist? So, I saw this movie when it first came out in theaters, and there were a lot of points in it that really just destroyed the DEI, whole agenda thing. At one point, he has a black producer. He has Robin DiAngelo give his black producer reparations, and she goes, it just seems uncomfortable. And it's like, how do you not think deeper than this moment right here? Like, you obviously think so deep, or maybe you don't, when you're outside of this moment, but you can't think deep enough to see how this would be weird for society at whole based off of this small interaction. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If you watch the movie, go watch his podcast with Joe Rogan. That one is very, very interesting up until they start talking about the moon. But Joe brought up a really good point within that podcast, which is that social media is kind of amplifying our societal emotions and causing us to be very, very polarized. And this DEI stuff is a very good example of that. You go online and you can see plenty of examples. Like, I watched that last night, and this morning I woke up and I wanted to check the comments because I left a few comments in there, and I wanted to check the comments just to see what was up. And I saw so many people who spent 30 minutes of their day, of their night or whatever, last night, commenting super hateful things that showed that they obviously didn't watch the video, just a bunch of just out there crap. And these people are spending 30, 40, sometimes an hour of their life writing comments that only a super small fraction of society is ever going to see that. And it's not going to matter in, even just 2 hours. It's not going to matter. Most people are going to disregard it. They're going to skip right over it, look at it, and just ignore it. And so that's, why do it to begin with? When I do a lot of stuff, or when I'm mad about something, or when I always ask myself, is this going to matter in 5 minutes? Is this going to matter in 5 days? Is this going to matter in 5 months? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, then I'm done with it. I'm not even gonna care, because it just doesn't make sense to give it the time of the day. So that leads me into my next point, which is all this political polarization going to lead us into a civil war? Yeah, I think it absolutely will. I'm not going to get too deep into that one. But it absolutely will. It'll lead us into a civil war. Because what you have right now is you have a whole bunch of people who are isolating themselves into their own little thought bubbles, and they're just growing and growing and growing their hate. And it just, we as a society need to take a step back and recognize that there's some bad eggs who are going to go on social media, and they're going to amplify things. And it's going to get to a point where you're going to have to discern what's real and what's not. We need to start finding a way to teach people to go outside, to be with their neighbor, to come together with family. And so that brings me to my next point, which is, look, I have been to Gettysburg. I have seen the generational scars of what can happen when there's a failure of people to come together. And I'm not saying that the Civil War was a bad thing. It got rid of slavery. I think slavery was a great evil in this country. I think it was a great evil in a great many countries. It's not an exclusive thing that's happened to America. But at the end of the day, the Civil War, you can't argue that it was super bad for America. 3.2% of America's population died. 1,030,000 casualties out of a 31.5 million person population. Okay? And there were more casualties on the northern side than there were on the Confederate side. So, you look at, who had all the support, who was a rebel, who was what. Doesn't matter, man. The government's going to send everything they have after you, okay? And it would be up to our military to take a stand and say, no, we're not going to do this. But inevitably, there would be people who would support the regime. And it would just polarize us even further, even further, even further, even further, until we have a full-blown civil war. And look, like I said, I've seen the generational scars of what can happen of a failure of people to come together. And that was back in the 1860s when the technology we were using was a Manet ball. Like, we have 30-round magazines and fully automatic rifles and hypersonic missiles and stuff today. Like, 3.2% of the population died back then. 3.2% of our population right now is like 30 million people, okay? And so if you think about, it's more like 7 million people, but if you think about how many people died in World War II, it was 85 million people at the most, for any historical calculations, died in World War II. And if America were to go into a civil war, at the very least, we would be looking at 7 million people, so that's like, what, 10% of the casualties of World War II just off of one country that was involved in that war. It doesn't make any sense why we would send ourselves there when I'm old enough to remember back in the 2000s when, race wasn't a big issue, It really was not a big issue. And if you made it a big issue, it would catch people off guard. Now it doesn't catch people off guard. What happens is people have picked a side. See, something, and I said this before I even got on the internet yesterday, and then I saw it a whole bunch of times on the internet. Something changed around 2012, 2013 in this country where people picked a side. Subconsciously, they picked a side, and they decided what side they were on, right or left. And that's just it. They're going to ride that until they die. And I don't understand that logic at all. We have a lot of common ground that we could come together over. So, we're going to move on from that topic. Yes, I think we could go into a civil war. Do I think it'd be good for our country? No, absolutely. Absolutely not. I don't think it would be good for our country. And I'll be honest with you, I still think we could avoid it if people choose to. I still think this country is savable. But we're getting to a point where it's not. We're getting to a point where it's so polarized where, like, there's going to need to be a separation of some states from the union. Otherwise, we're going to have a ginormous conflict. So that brings me into my last point, which is kind of an oddball, but would legalizing marijuana save the United States economy? Yes, I think it would save the United States economy. I think it would be really good for the economy. Not only would it give us a ginormous new industry that's homegrown and provide for a lot of jobs, but it would bring in a lot of tax revenue, which would be used to improve infrastructure and different stuff. We would bring in a lot of tourists, and those tourists would be bringing in money from other countries, and they would come here simply so that they could enjoy the scenery in the United States, smoke a little bit of pot, try it, whatever, do it legally, get away from their country's laws, something like that. I don't know. Same reasons a lot of foreigners are going to California and Colorado lately, and the same reason why a lot of people are going to Colorado and California lately, and that's so simply just so they can go smoke some weed, chill, do whatever, get it, bring it home, whatever. And so you would see a ginormous uptick in marijuana-related economic volume. However, I don't think that they should. And the reason being is because with all that, like I just said, you get a lot of people from outside of your country coming in, and how many of them would leave? Okay? We already have an illegal immigration problem, so we can't be necessarily dealing with a new classification of these illegal immigrants. We got to deal with the first group of people first. And then also you look at, traffic accidents in Colorado, California, since they legalized pot, way up. People get more bold with it. They think they can drive on it. Back when I was a pothead, I can't tell you how many times I drove through a light and I was like, shit, was that light red? I didn't even know, man. What if someone was walking across the street? See what I'm saying, man? Like, you don't know. You think you're fine, and then you're not fine. You see stuff like that. You see people who are unmotivated to work. You see people flock to the marijuana industry like crazy just so they can get in on this gold rush or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, man, like, it could do a lot more harm than good to legalize marijuana outright, just entirely, and just let people run wild with it. Because the fact of the matter is that the rest of the world doesn't have it legalized. They don't. And so it would, yes, open up a big shop in the United States, and we'd become the only free market that allows marijuana to be sold on the free market. But at the end of the day, at what cost would that come? You know, go look at statistics of what's going on in some of these states that have legalized marijuana. Homelessness, crime. You know, they said crime would go down when they legalized marijuana, and they were wrong. They said homelessness would go down when they legalized marijuana, and they were wrong. They said schools and roads would get better. And maybe they were right, but at what cost? You have more homelessness. You have more crime. You have more automobile accidents, which means more dead people. Doesn't make any sense to me, you know? Doesn't make any sense to me. And there's just as many people getting into automobile accidents that involve them being high on marijuana than on alcohol in the state of Colorado. As far as I know, the last time I checked statistics, it may be different right now. They're always freaking changing. But back in about 2022, 2023, when I really did a deep dive on it, that was the case. It was like 30,000 alcohol deaths and then like 32,000 marijuana deaths. It was actually more for marijuana, but so no, I don't think that we should legalize it. I do think it would save our economy, but not all things that are shiny are good. You know what I'm saying? I think our economy is savable the way that it's already built. And I think that if we do medical, we decriminalize the, marijuana, decriminalize it, slap a ginormous fine on it. If you can't pay your fine, you go to a work prison, whatever. It doesn't go on your record, all that stuff doesn't keep you from getting a job. It's just decriminalized. You can get it medically, whatever. I think that'd be a good thing. Decriminalizing it in the way where it's just a small fine and you don't go to jail, and we're keeping people out of our, justice system. That doesn't make any sense to me, because it opens the door wider for other behavior like cocaine and, fentanyl and all that stuff. And so, if you think I'm wrong, just go look at Oregon. Oregon is a perfect example of why I'm right. The more these states legalize marijuana, the more problems they start to have. It's very obvious. It's very trackable. And if it's not trackable, it's because the state probably tried to hide it. They probably tried to hide statistics. And governments do that all the time. And it just is really funny to me that the governments that seem to hide the statistics all the time are always like local Democrat governments or like Democrat county commissioners or whatever, and they suppress statistics because they don't want you to know what's actually going on in the county. Okay? And I've seen it in multiple places where I've lived now. It's just a tragedy. It's just sad, man. So that's today's episode. Short, sweet, quick to the point. Go see Am I Racist? Go see Reagan. That's a good movie too. Stay off of social media as much. Don't get into comment wars. Take it easy, man. Life's really not that bad if you just kind of look around, dude. I got a moon behind me. It's kind of beautiful. Sitting through the clouds. I'm in Missouri right now. It's kind of warm. 70-degree morning. Got some coffee. It's a good time, man. Go outside today. Go outside. Even if you live in a city, man. Go outside. Go see what's up. Just walk around. Don't be scared about it. Say hi to somebody. Hold a door for somebody. Something like that. Read Walks and Talks.